Well, actually, I kind of want to ask you. I don't know how much of that you want to edit out. If,
Oh, I figure I'll leave
yeah,
all that
I
out.
thought,
We'll pick
yeah.
up from
So let me ask.
something
So
else.
I actually have some questions that I think would be good to go in the show. I assume because like the whole time you were talking, I assumed that all of that was gonna, none of that was gonna make it. So I wanted to. I don't know if you want to give an update for your ankle because I want to because I know it's been a couple of weeks and I don't know if you. I don't know if you have any updates. Um,
Yeah, I can.
I don't, and but anyway, I'll actually ask you some questions about that without really alluding to what happened, and then you're probably going to repeat yourself a little bit, but it'd be worth it for the show.
Okay. Well, let's pick up with a point where I'll be cognizant of what I say, just so I don't have to edit
Sounds great
too
to
hard.
me.
Do you want me to start with
Yeah,
an
yeah,
update?
I
Would
think
that
so.
make more sense?
How's your ankle?
It's okay. I keep having to remind myself how big a deal
Mm-hmm.
it really is because we're at that point, we're at that period where I just want it to be done, and we're not even halfway through. And it's just because, on one side, it's like, well, the first couple of weeks went by pretty quick, and then we started to hit that slower. Yeah, now we're in the meat of this whole recovery time frame thing. And two, you think about it on the one hand, if I had done the less invasive, less uh, complete repair, then I would be most of the way through the non-wood
Right.
bearing section, because that was 6 weeks instead of 12 weeks. Um, and so there's all the conflicting thoughts about that. But why I have to keep reminding myself is just, you can tell from, well, one, since we last recorded, not since the last show aired, but since we last recorded, uh, now no longer have the splint and the bandages. It's a full proper cast for supposed to be 3 weeks, but it'll be 4 weeks, just based on the way timing of appointments and all worked out. And so it's difficult to see for sure. But what I was going to say is that I can tell from my toes and the way that my foot feels, there's still swelling just from being vertical. Once when the blood goes back down in the foot instead of it being elevated, it's very much still swollen and recovering, and bruised and all that stuff. And so I have to keep reminding myself just how major it really was for it being something that doesn't necessarily feel like it was major surgery. And I think we talked about this before. Like, it's not open heart surgery or something that we think of as major surgery, but it's pretty much as major as you
That's
can get for
I think
that
it sounds like a
area.
very invasive surgery for the area.
Yes, very much so. And so if you think about it being trauma to the foot from bone all the way out that has to heal, and you put it in that perspective mentally, it's a lot easier to reconcile with, well, yeah, of course it takes this long to
Yeah, I
heal.
think that when you anytime bone is involved, then yes, that's as invasive as you can get for the area.
Right. And so, like, overall, it's okay. I'm frustrated that we're not further along, but I knew I was going to be that way. I am back to working out, at least, which has helped because I don't feel as inactive, I guess, is maybe the best way to summarize it. I am, of course, not doing what I want to be doing, working out. So there's frustration on the fact that I hate the workouts I'm doing. But I know that mentally, physiologically, it's better for me to do it. I feel better just being active in general. I know it helps emotionally and everything too. So slogging through those. And yeah, I also have been using the knee crutch a little bit, which has helped immensely with being able to do things. It is insanely uncomfortable with the cast because the cast then digs into the shin. And so I've tried a number of different things to try to pad the little gap between the cast and my shin and trying to find ways to make it more comfortable. I will continue to experiment with that, but honestly, until we remove the cast and it's using the air cast boot as the cast instead, I don't really have a lot of flexibility with what I can do. So What it really amounts to is just I'm limited in the amount of time that I can use the knee crutch before I just have to pull it off. But outside of that, things are progressing. That's a good way to think of it.
Progressing the way it can progress, and you sound like you're in good spirits despite being frustrated.
Yeah, well, I mean, I have so many things marked on the calendar. For example, yesterday was 1 month post-surgery. And then I have, like, tomorrow is 2 weeks in the cast. And then Friday will be 5 weeks completed of the 12. And so it's like every few days there's another, all right, we're at this point, just as a reminder to keep it, that I'm making progress. It's slow, it's frustrating, but I am making progress.
I'm glad that you're making progress. I'm glad that you're keeping your spirits up as much as possible. And some of the questions I had based on the that's the full update at the moment, right?
Yeah, that's pretty much where it's probably going to be the same general update for a couple of weeks, other than just achiness. But yeah, we'll see. It'll be interesting to see how different minor pieces kind of.
I honestly
progress.
expect, I guess, until the next time you go to the doctor, it's going to be the same update. But I'm curious to know. I guess this point, it's like updates on like how you're handling things, how you're dealing with getting through it. Gosh, because I mean, you were super active right before it happened, and you were pushing it, and that's I understand that's why what led you to say, okay, if I have to take time off, then I'm going to take let's do it right, and so that you can go back to the lifestyle that you were living in. And I get how frustrating that is. So, based on the conversation, we were talking about something that happened today at your house, and that led you to a place of like, I feel angry about this thing, and it's one of those things. It's like I think it's expected to be angry about something, but it's also like, without divulging too much, because I've had this happen. It's like kids are going to be kids, people are going to be people, and there's a certain you can't expect people in your life to change who they are, because that's not how people work. The only person that you have any ability to change is yourself. And I know this is kind of a big general statement about something that we were talking specifically, but that leads me in, the question that I wanted to ask about it is like, how do you, when you can be appropriately angry about something, but understand that it's misplaced anger, how do you deal with that?
Depends a lot on the situation.
Let's say family members. Like, family members are going to be family members. Children are going to be children.
See, even that depends a lot on the situation. So,
Fair enough.
So knowing what occurred and what kind of brought the question up, I'll generalize it for that first, and then kind of explain why I say it depends. I am far more level-headed when it comes to immediate family members being, spouse, child. I think it's predominantly just because of the amount of time around them, where I tend to be more aware of what I'm actually feeling about an action and what drove it than maybe what it's in a reaction to. So for this particular example, at a high level, just for the sake of listeners, my son did something stupid and got hurt. Thankfully is okay. A little bit concerned maybe about whether there's some impact-related damage to his shoulder from falling on it, but I don't necessarily think so. But anyway, and where this question comes from is I had mentioned that I had my priorities in the right place. So, I'm, as we were just talking about, recovering from surgery, so I had a very difficult time getting to the incident quickly. Thankfully, my wife was here and was able to get there quick enough that I was able to maintain a level head and not do something stupid and mess up my recovery. And get in. First questions are really focused over, are you okay? What kind of walk me through what happened so I know what I need to look at and make sure things are okay and blah, 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 blah. and just general what I would consider, if anybody has ever worked in any incident response type of capacity or had any type of incident response training, it kicks in if you're around it enough, and you very much focus on where's the pain, where is anything look like it's hemorrhaging, I don't see any blood, is there anything that's bleeding, where was any impact, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so getting through that piece, and then in the kind of post conversation, making it known that yes, while obviously I didn't come in yelling and everything else, I do also want to make sure that that I'm angry, I'm feeling frustrated and everything else. And so if my voice is changing, or if I'm short with an answer, I want you to understand that that's why. We're not going to worry about that right now. What we're worried about is you being okay, but I want to make sure you don't just react to the way I say something because of how I'm feeling. And then get further removed from that. And wife and I were talking about it after the fact, and I conveyed some anger that I felt was misplaced, even though I think it's rational, and recognizing that it was misplaced, but then also some anger that maybe there wasn't a better amount of common sense equivalent to my common sense level at the age. And then, of course, conversations about how no kids have common sense anyway.
Yeah.
And just
I was going to say, I like how, I think I've mentioned this before in the show, but, and I don't say this about my kids, but I often think about this, understanding, your child's brain isn't developed yet, and that's why they do what they do. And then, when they get to a certain age, a surge of hormones kicks in, and then they get, it gets worse, or seemingly gets worse. But, and it's not until your mid-20s that your prefrontal cortex finishes developing. And guess what? Society knows this because you can't rent a car until you're 25. So why they don't teach that to us? There's many reasons. Listen to the previous 229 episodes and you'll find them. Yeah. So, but I was just thinking about Bill Cosby. He used to refer to his children as the brain damaged people. And while it's not brain damage, it's not a fully functioning brain, or it's not that's not true. It's not a mature brain. It's not it hasn't, you got to put it back, it hasn't ripened yet. It's not time to take it off leave it on the branch.
Right. And so through all that conversation is what kind of brought us to your question. And so following from that, when it comes to spouse and child, as I mentioned, I don't know if it's just proximity and everything else, or how much or how involved, or trying to be aware of it. There are all sorts of different factors that go in. But the main thing that I kind of approach each of those situations with is, one, is there anything that is a concern for health and well-being? And let's address that first. And if I focus on that, then it tends to be a kind of level set for where I am mentally and emotionally, because I'm responding to whatever's going on. Most of the time, it's not in regard to an incident like that, where it's more, I don't know, something that wouldn't necessarily have any concern for health or well-being necessarily, but it gives me a checklist. It's the very first thing. That's paramount importance, and if I think about that or make myself check that, it gives me that moment to kind of take a breath, and then how am I feeling and why am I feeling it? And that'd be kind of the next question. Because everything else, if there's no concern about, well-being, that means it doesn't need an immediate have to respond right this second. I can take a breath and kind of mentally figure out, okay, what is my next step? What is the next response? The reason I said it depends, even with family members, is there are certain family members that I don't have that type of immediate focus on health and well-being and pause to think. It's just kind of retaliatory or lashing out just because of how they are. And I've tried to make that better over the years as well. And it's kind of gone from one extreme to another sometimes and been all over the place. And I think most of it is just age at this point, that I've reached a level of general at ease with existing, maybe, just at this stage of life where I already have to deal so much with unknown things anyway, or what's coming next, or whatever the case may be, that kind of everything feels more like a just take a moment and figure out, what am I feeling? Why am I feeling it? Is this justifiable? It doesn't necessarily take long to hit those. And I don't know if that's exactly what you were asking, but that's kind of how I interpreted the question.
I think so. I think so. And this sort of actually would lead into the topic we discussed last time about I feel like we could segue into it, but I had a couple of follow up and pre-flight items. I can't remember if it was last show or the show. I assume it was the last show that we talked about. Well, the note I left was corporate policy is the setup for so this might have been from 2 episodes ago. Sorry. Corporate policy is the setup for customer service failure. And we didn't talk about and I didn't know what it was, so I put je ne sais quoi, for which we probably have the most insight, and that's the Apple Store Genius Bar. Does this conversation ring a bell to you?
Partially, yes.
I think it had to do with probably a tangent or some discussion we had regarding corporations now being the bad guys in movies after we discussed Carry On.
Yeah, that sounds right. Well, I kept confusing exactly where this might have come from, because there was also a non-part of the show conversation we had that I thought could be related as well. And so I was kind of struggling a little bit with identifying exactly what sparked it.
Well, I was going to say, basically, my experience, so I can't say it for all, but my experience being on the company side of corporate service, or customer service in technology, the solution seemed really easy to me. And that is, spend more money. Like, spend more money to get the best talent there is, and spend more money keeping the talent there, because people who are good at customer service in the technology field, because I don't think there's a huge amount of overlap there. You can get someone who's very technically savvy and they're not good in customer service, or you have someone who's really good at customer service who's not necessarily tech savvy. And when you have when you get that small overlap, those people end up not staying because the money's not good, and people recognize their talent and they lure them away with better paying jobs, more interesting jobs. And so, yeah, that was a thing I saw at the Apple Store, and that's a thing, like all 3 Apple stores I worked at. That was definitely a thing. And I mean, to be fair, the same Apple Store let both of us go. They didn't try to keep us. And
yeah, I made it pretty difficult though from my perspective.
No, by that point it was already too late.
Yeah,
like that was it was way past that. You were, to quote John Mulaney, we are well past that. I was listening to the episode that released yesterday today, and I liked how it opened. So anyway, I don't know that I wanted to have a lot of conversation about that, but when I was listening to 228, that was a thought I had, and it was just like, we didn't even talk about the Genius Bar.
Yeah, I also look at that as a little bit of a different animal because of how embedded it is in a retail space, and I think that also kind of muddies the water a lot with regard to,
I agree,
it being a tech-based customer service role. You have that for sure. I'm not disputing that at all. But if you were to take the Genius Bar out of the retail environment and have it be its own thing, I think it would be better. But at the same time, just the nature of what it does and what it services, it's no different than the little mom and pop computer repair shops at that point that are also just kind of the same. It's Apple is in a different position where they could afford to pay more. They just don't. The mom and pop shops probably can't afford to pay more, but are probably somewhat more enjoyable to work for because they're not driven as much by the retail corporate side of things. Whereas, if you, just to bring it full circle, if you talk about some other customer service technology roles that we might have shared experiences
Overlap.
with,
Sure.
those could be done so much better. And there it is very much a lack of agreeing to spend the money to do it. And so those people say, well, I see these other things that I know I can learn to do and would be have more enjoyment doing, so I will pursue that path. And it's difficult to separate that from like career growth as you think about it in business terms, and how you want people to navigate and do things, because it gives them something to work for that you can pay them chump change to navigate through if you keep them long enough, and make them feel like they're making progress. Or if you were to actually embody what it means to progress through this technical customer service side and give a career path that makes sense and run it appropriately, you'd be amazed at what you could do. And the big problem is just that no company wants to take the time to do B. They want to stick with the status quo and do all the stuff that just doesn't retain good talent. And so,
You could smack them in the face with it as hard as you can, and they'd be like, no, we're not going to do that.
I specifically gave a multiple page write-up to someone who could make some of those decisions at one point, and all of it was ignored, and the bullshit that they did instead was done. So, yeah.
The thing is, when you try to do something, it's not. I don't even want to use. I feel like maybe the word radical is not even. It's not even. That's too strong a word. But if you try to do something that is just not the status, that doesn't that veers from the status quo just far enough, which is not that far, it's like it's too much of a risk. It's too much of a risk. And because they're I speaking of, I'm going to go back to the Genius Bar in a moment, but speaking of in the where you would giving a write up, I think in that role you had people there that if you paid them, I'm going to say double, just because that's in terms of being in that role, that's a lot of money, and it would convince a lot of people to stay where they are and brag about it. But in terms of like a corporation, it's not that much money. And because God, look how much we pay people in the C-suite, or they pay not we, they. So there's money, I think, is the main motivator. And two, you would have people who they need just enough something new, something interesting, something that gets their mind working on a slightly different problem, so that they're not in a rut all the time, that you could offer and let it be totally voluntary, such as not an internship, but what did Apple call them? Because I know Emily went on one.
Career experience.
So okay, that's a bit too much, but but essentially, let me go to do another role, something that is different than what I'm doing now, just to get out of the rut, and just let me do the whether it be for this part of my weekly activity, or I'm going to do this for however many weeks in a row, but essentially a program that gets you out of the day-to-day and allows you to learn a new part of the business and allows you to be a more well-rounded individual, and the people that would be the mentors for that also helps them, because then they're like, oh, one, they're having to rethink about things that they haven't thought about in a long time, because it's been a normal day-to-day thing. And two, you have somebody who hopefully is asking new and good questions, even if they are basic questions, and that gets you thinking about your thing, the thing that the work that you do in a slightly different way. I know that, uh, like having kids and having somebody, you know, you know, people asking you questions about a thing that, oh, you thought I used to work on this in my, I used to do this thing and I was interested in this topic. And then you asked me this question I haven't thought about in a long time. And now that I'm older and have experienced more parts of life, I still know the same basic thing, but like I'm thinking about it again in a new way. And so I think it's good for everybody, and nobody does it, or very few people do it, or very few companies do it. And it would be a fantastic way of retaining talent.
I mean, we could probably make an episode out of it if you really wanted to, because I have so many different thoughts on ways things could be incorporated that would not be that big a shift from the way things are done now, which I've even made recommendations on in the past. And it's not rocket science or brain surgery or any other number of things that you want to use to compare it to. It's just common sense. We're all human. Well, we think we're all human. There are a few people that we can make some questionable exceptions for. And we all have the same basic general desires at some level. And we know that and we understand that. So why do we keep trying to do things that aren't effective or don't take that into consideration? And it's because it's the quote unquote way business is done. And well, quite frankly, business can go fuck itself. It's not working very well.
That's the problem. It's like your customer service, your customer satisfaction numbers are bad, or not bad necessarily, but your the people that are providing customer service are, there's a lot of turnover, and that's frustrating in that role. And it's frustrating. There's a lot of frustrations that can come from that are avoidable. But then this whole idea can be spread out to a lot of different things. It's at this point, the way to make, the best way to increase your salary is to jump between jobs every 3 to 5 years. Go to a new job every 3 to 5 years until it's no longer viable. So, but I wanted to go back to the Genius Bar and say, like, that was one that I just like. I mean, if you want interactions to be 15 minutes long because you have that many customers, you need more people. You need more staff.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, for a retail position, they were paying really well, but for a tech job, they weren't paying well at all. And I know that when I was in New York, I worked with somebody who worked with somebody. So I worked, one of my lead geniuses worked at the Soho store. That was the first New York City store. And it opened in the early 2000s. And at that point in time, they were paying geniuses what you would pay somebody, over 20 years ago, they were paying 6-figure to work in a retail store because they were hiring people with computer science degrees to work in the store. And they had to be competitive in the tech sector, not the retail sector, for those positions. And there was one guy, she was telling me, so this was in 2010, around 2010 when she was telling me this. So at that point, he'd been there for less than 10 years. And he was staying there because his responsibilities went down and his pay did not, because they weren't going to ever reduce his pay. Well, so it just, it was clear to me very early, day 2, that you hire more people and you pay them just a little more than, like, you didn't have to, they relax what they, the requirements, you didn't even have to have a college degree to work there, but, you had to know something about computers to get into that position. And if you just pay people, 50% more than they were, man, people would be so happy about that. And like also provide them with enough support to do what you asked them to do. I believe you also wrote a letter.
Yes, I did.
That as well.
And it definitely included some of that.
Yeah.
One of my favorite lines, and I'm not going to quote it verbatim because I don't remember it verbatim, but I remember specifically giving the example that I did not choose to work there for the money because that would have been foolish. And then, case in point, was before I even left, I already had, without even submitting, resumes and all prior to submitting my resignation, just in the short time post resignation, I already had a couple of offers. One being where I would make double easily what I was making there. So I could very clearly say with empirical evidence that it was not about the money that attracted me to the position. And they failed to keep me because it was not everything else that should have been maintained with regard to the position.
One of the things that I think about, or this just made me think about, and that is that's like the problem. I can't imagine that this is. There's no way to not be frustrated by being the smartest person in the room, because you're either the smartest person in the room and you know it, and you know that people aren't going to understand you. But I think in my case, when I am the smartest person in the room, I don't realize I'm the smartest person in the room, and I'm expecting people to be smarter than me. Either way, it's incredibly frustrating.
Yeah, so one of the things that always bugs me, because what's funny about the way I approach things is I am definitely confident in my abilities. I don't think anybody would ever guess otherwise. I always assume there is somebody in the room smarter than me.
Me too.
And I'm an oddball in that regard because I may very well be the smartest in the room, but I'm always going to assume there's at least one other person smarter, if not more, because it's better to keep that kind of humility, or not even humility, it's the wrong word, but that level of humbleness where maybe you need to explain it and maybe you don't. But the key thing is, don't think you have all the answers. Make sure you listen to the other, whatever else the input is, because you may not be the smartest on that particular piece. And that has served me well, because then, within a few minutes of somebody talking, if even that long, it's very clear whether they're intelligent or not. And then you can kind of write them off. But I think that's also a double-edged sword, because then you immediately recognize that, well, they're not the smart one.
Right.
And that makes it difficult too. But it's kind of fascinating to think about how few people who would consider themselves at least among the most intelligent in a room don't maintain that mindset, or don't maintain that willingness to listen, at least for a moment.
I didn't know where to go from here, because I felt like that was a good conversation.
Yeah, I guess the next thing would be anything else that you want to go ahead and pull into the show before we.
Well, we were going to talk about Shrinking, and I really want to talk about it because I really enjoyed the second season of Shrinking.
Do you want to go ahead and go into that then? I mean, I think it fits because we're talking about
I think so.
Mindset and all.
Yeah, I think so.
So I know I originally brought it up, but the reason I brought it up, what I didn't want to talk about at all until after you had seen it, and I'm going to pause and say, if you care at all about watching the show and want to not be spoiled by anything, this is your fair warning to pause and come back to this episode when you have finished out season 2 of Shrinking.
We should put in like a timestamp that they could skip to.
No, I'm going to just say that you can't continue with this episode at all until you finish out Shrinking.
Fair enough.
But the way they did the finale and brought everything together was perfect for me.
I loved it, and I really loved how they ended it for a few reasons. Let me ask you, did you think that, or I keep wanting to call him by the actor's name or by his character's name from Ted Lasso, and I'm stalling so that I can find his character's name in the show.
Actually, I wish I could remember now. Because the entire time I see him, the only thing I can think about is this character name from Ted Lasso. It's the one thing that breaks me from the show, and I just accept it because I love the character there too.
Oh, and the actor is so good too. Um, you'd think I'd have gotten the name by now, but it's not until just this moment that it's Lewis. Lewis is the character. So Brett Goldstein was the actor. Um, and so I'd noticed at the beginning, like before he was in an episode, that he was a producer, and I was like, oh, okay, because um, so I was like, that kind of makes sense because I noticed his credit, and I didn't know he was going to be in the season because he comes a few episodes. I can't remember what episode, but he's not in the first episode, or maybe he is. I don't remember, but I just remember noticing the Brett Goldstein as a producer, and I was like, that kind of made sense because the actor's backstory was that he was a writer. He was brought on to Ted Lasso as a writer, and Bill Lawrence was a writer, I think, for Spin City before he was a showrunner for Scrubs. So he's a writer and showrunner. So he comes from that side of the production. And so I was like, okay, it makes sense. And then when he was like showed up as an actor, as a character, portraying a character on the show, I thought, oh, that's cool. It makes sense. So anyway, I have lost my train of thought as where I was going with this, and I apologize.
That's no worries. I don't think he showed up until like the third or fourth episode in. It might have been sooner than that, but I do not remember him right at first for the season. And because when he first showed up, I had to do a double take because it actually took me a second because the mannerisms and all of the character don't match what I expect when I see him anymore. And
he didn't have a beard. Yeah.
And so it did take me a second, and only a second, but still that moment of, wait a minute, is that? Yeah, it is. And I do not remember that in the first episode. It's the only reason that I don't believe that he showed up until a couple of episodes in. But I had no clue which way they were going to go with that character.
So we have to talk okay. I was going to say, are we going to talk about the last scene first? Because I think we should.
the last scene first. I had no clue which way they were going to go because I could see either one being such a powerful mechanic for the story.
Yeah.
And in my head, the only thing that I kept thinking of is, please don't go the predictable path.
Which would be for him to jump.
Right. And not because I don't want to call attention to it.
They earned it.
Yeah. This goes back to something I've said multiple times. Like, if you ever are struggling and feel like you don't belong and it should just be over, talk to someone, please. There is, for every person out there, there is somebody that you are a good reason for them to still exist, even if you don't believe it. And so as they were going through that scene, it's like, you could definitely make this episode really hit home for people by having him go through with it.
Hey,
but you could.
Hey, I think you're on my. Something happened with the call, and you're on my phone. That's weird.
Odd. All I saw was you joined.
I need to hang up and.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
I can.
That was really weird. I'm so sorry about that.
No problem. Did it ever actually drop? Like, I didn't see it drop.
It did, and somehow I simultaneously joined from my Mac and my phone, and that's why.
Fun.
I had moved something around, and I inadvertently bumped on something. I didn't touch my computer keyboard, so I don't know. Maybe the call transferred to my phone, setting it on the desk over there because I was holding it, looking up Brett Goldstein's character's name, and your voice stopped, and then I saw the FaceTime application was back to not on a call, and then when I tried to join I joined from the computer, and then I heard it on my phone, and I was like, that's weird.
Strange.
Anyway, I am so sorry for interrupting your.
I think it had turned into a bit of a long-winded because I didn't have a good landing point, and so I was trying to figure it out. But the big thing is they really could have gone either way, and I was really glad they didn't take the the way that you really expected it to go by the
Well,
time that
it's
they got there.
well. See, so again, spoilers. I 100% expected Lewis to jump on the track and commit suicide. Whether or not he would have been successful or not, I literally thought, and I think I don't, watching that scene, I watched that scene again, and I watched it twice, and I'm not sure that he was contemplating it so much as the storytellers were trying to misdirect you. Um, and when, um, when Jimmy showed up and wanted to talk to him and just do what Jimmy does for all of his patients and the people in his life, and that is be a decent human being and show compassion and love, and that I think was fantastic, because they earned that as well. They didn't do it in a way that was trite or sappy. Like, it was delightful, and I think that's a harder place to earn than suicide.
Well, and they didn't take the other expected avenue, which was to have Alice show up.
Right.
Because that would have cheapened it for me.
For sure. Because they were already friends.
Right. And so
or they were already,
they were at least conversing. Yeah. And rapport. So I really, like, as soon as that happened, it was one of those things where, no, this is a phenomenal episode. For anything else that may have happened or gone into it, not only did they earn it and earn it spectacularly, but it really drove home the big things about being people.
It fit the show.
Loved it.
I think it fits the nature of the show, and I think it really goes to show that most of our lives are not full of drama. Most of our lives are hard because just existing in society and having feelings and trying to deal with feelings, and other people having feelings and their own sometimes I feel like trauma is the wrong word, but their own, whatever it is that they have to work out in life to be a decent person. We all have that, and I feel like the show just sort of shows like a sort of, it's not overly dramatic and it's not under dramatic and it's not sugarcoating things, and it is a TV show, so certain things aren't going to happen, and most people aren't going to lose a spouse to an automobile accident, but it's not unheard of, and it's such a delightful show, and it doesn't shy away from difficult topics that viewers would watch.
And taking it above and beyond that, I think part of why I have loved the show so much is it doesn't shy away from them. It doesn't treat them with a lower level of priority or importance. The issues that it addresses or talks about are prominent and right there, part of the story. It works through them, but it also maintains its bona fide status as entertainment. It knows when to say, you need a break for a moment,
yes,
and then we can come back to it. And that's such a difficult thing to do with this type of subject matter that I really have to applaud them so well for pulling it off the way they have. I think the only thing that maybe could have been questionable about the way they were able to pull things off, or having to rectify all of the story arcs by the end of the season, or rectify is the wrong word, having to give you some sense of closure for all of the story arcs that were part of the season by the end of the season. But that's just the nature of television, right? I mean, you don't want to necessarily have something that has to go to the next season, because that leaves your audience frustrated. But at the same time, you could say maybe it's a little too neat how they get from point A to point B. The reason that I don't necessarily knock it is because I think they earn closure. They spend enough time, and it doesn't have to be resolved within the scope of one episode, that you can feel like it, okay, with some with a moment or two or whatever passage of time and a little bit of reflection, we get to this point. And then we get to this point, and then we get to this point, and then it's kind of a logical conclusion. And I think they earn those moments of conciseness by how well they illustrate each of those kind of stepping stones.
I agree. That show earns a lot, and actually, nothing that I've seen in that show feels unearned.
And that's why I even struggled saying that there was potentially a knock, other than you have to recognize that it's still a TV show.
Right.
There's an aspect of, well, of course it's going to resolve itself within a certain amount of time because it's a TV show.
Right. And there are people that just don't like unresolved television, or unresolved, or there's a certain kind of story that can be left, an ending that can be left open to interpretation, and I enjoy that when it's earned. But there are some people that will never enjoy that, and that's okay too. And so I think that there's a balance to be struck, because there's certain things that I think even the writing, the folks on the writing team, they're like, well, we have to close this up because it's going to be problematic for it to go into the next season or whatever. There's that aspect of it, and there's also the viewership. It's like, well, we want some amount of closure, and so I feel like I'm rambling at this point about the end of things.
I felt the same way with the other piece. The way I would illustrate it, I think, is a good point. You could have technically ended the episode with the suggestion that maybe he did, maybe he didn't.
Yeah.
And you could have rightfully done so, and it would have been okay.
It would have felt out of place, though.
Right. Whereas something like 7, where you have a bit of a question mark on the way it ended, did not feel out of place. It felt like a natural progression of getting there. And you have pretty strong insinuations about what happened anyway. Like it's almost a given, but it's still technically unknown. And I think
that's true.
That type of openness is something we accept in that type of storytelling or that type of medium that we don't accept from a series when we know that there has to be a certain amount of stuff taken care of. Or, well, I mean, we say that, but technically you don't. There's nothing that says you have to resolve anything ever within a series either. So you could, I guess, take a radical approach and not resolve anything and see how long you go. But there is a difference in, just because you could do it doesn't mean that it really feels right. And I think that's where they strike the right balance.
I think that you could, if there was no season 3, you wouldn't be left wondering what happened with Jimmy and Lewis. It's certainly open to interpretation.
I think you could still be left wondering, because the way they really leaned into this episode was as a decent person who realized there was a problem because of his background and professional life, and knew that something had to be done, but there's still a lot of unresolved personal issues for Jimmy that you could really question what happened and what came next.
Well, yeah, I think I don't think it's 100% closed, and I think that there is some, it is open to speculation, not even interpretation, but speculation, and that's just, I think you could say that with every story, perhaps. Yeah, but the thing is, the reason I think that there's not really anything left to interpretation is because he knew what he was doing. He knew what he was doing. He realized what he was doing to hurt himself, not to hurt Lewis, but that what he was doing was hurting himself more than hurting anyone else. And then the person that was hurting most next would be Alice. And he did what he needed to do. And he didn't do it for the sake of Alice, and he didn't do it for the sake of himself. He did it because he was, it's hard to say. It's one of those things where it's like, is it altruistic, or is it, there are certain things that seem altruistic, but you're actually doing them for yourselves, or you can't separate that it does benefit you, or benefits you, or someone that you love. So, but I think the point was, he wasn't doing it to, like, he was genuinely making a connection. Now, whether or not that they ever meet again, open to speculation, but I feel like there was complete closure in how Jimmy was handling that particular person in his life, particularly Lewis in his life.
I would agree with that. And as you were speaking, or as you were talking about it, I think the other thing that I would emphasize, the whole altruistic piece or not, he did it from a place of caring about other people.
He didn't do it for himself. He did it for altruistic reasons.
Well, he did it because at his core, he cares about other people.
Yeah.
Whether that's you can consider it altruistic if you really wanted to take the definition to, well, because I care about other people, I do things to help other people, which further makes me feel better. You can always make it to some level about the individual if you really want to. That's the kind of problem with behavior in general. But the way to kind of wrap your head around it and take a step back is the thoughts that came into his head were specifically, or I don't want to imply that I know what the character was thinking or the writers were thinking. The way that it played out on screen, which means that the behavior, the behavior that they were specifically pushing and reinforcing is that here is a guy that cares about other people and he doesn't want to see other people hurt. And when it comes down to it, he gets an idea that somebody's going to be hurt in some way, and his response is to try to assist, try to help, try to ease, try to be compassionate, whatever that is, to try to be someone who that person needs, or not necessarily even needs, but can help that person navigate that moment. And that's what I think, this is why I've been so pulled into the show, is that's what we've talked about for a couple of hundred episodes. It's, what does it mean to just be a decent person for the person beside you, or the person calling for or conveying some need or some desire for assistance in some way that maybe isn't clear or not picked up on. In this case, it was, this person really was at a low point and needed a friend, and reached out to the one person that they had kind of cultivated some level of connection to, even though it has its own other things, and the response doesn't come from this person. It comes from this other person's father showing up and just genuinely caring that you don't hurt yourself. If only we could all think that way. It's amazing how simple just a little bit of compassion is.
While watching the second season, I realized I'm Derek. Not Derek 2, just Derek.
What makes you say you're Derek?
Oh, just
the only reason I ask is what made you decide, oh, I'm him?
There's a number of things. I didn't catch it in the first season, but I would totally, if I had a Pam in my neighborhood, I would always say, eat a dick, Pam. Like, I'd always be saying that to her. But I didn't catch that in the first season about myself, But just, I think it was like I wouldn't call him, like, he's not, what is the opposite of confidence?
So,
because I wouldn't call him necessarily a very confident person. I mean, he does have confidence, but I wouldn't. But he seems to be free of social anxiety.
I could go with that.
Like it's like one of those things. I like the thing. It's like when your boss calls you into his office, are you afraid that something bad's going to happen, or you be like, oh, he wants to tell me how good I'm doing? And Derek is like the kind of person who's like, oh, obviously they're going to tell me how good I'm doing. And that was always me. Anytime I was ever asked into the boss's office, I was like, oh, they're ready to tell me what a great job I'm doing. And one time it wasn't that, but it wasn't a bad thing.
I think you could say that he's secure in most of his interactions.
He is. And
Like
I don't know.
because I do think
Yeah.
that's a little bit different from being confident.
Confidence. Yeah.
But he has a certain natural confidence bred from being secure in what he does and doesn't do.
He's a secure person. And I wouldn't, if you'd said, how would you describe yourself? I wouldn't have chosen that to describe myself, but I think I would now, using him as a reflection. So,
I have no clue who I would equate myself most to, because there are definite portions of Harrison Ford's character that
for sure,
am very, very much in line with. But there are portions of Jimmy's character that I feel like I identify really well with.
I would. No surprise.
And there are portions of Derek too that I feel like I
yeah, yeah. I like. Well, one of the things was a few years ago. I remember on Facebook there was a thing going around. It's like, what 3 fictional characters represent who you are? And at the time, I know I had picked Ted Mosby from How I Met Your Mother. I'm trying to remember who the other one I picked, and I was like, I figured there was 2. I was like, Ted Mosby was one, and I don't remember the other, but I felt like they fit more than the third one. And the third one was like, well, I don't really like this one. I'll have to go with Ross, but he's easily kicked out, and it's Derek. So I got to think about who that third person was. I bet we talked about this on the show, and if I could search the transcripts, anyway, yeah, it was a great show. I look forward to season 3. I think it did get renewed for season 3, if I'm not. And shoot, I love Gabby's house.
Yeah.
I want to live there.
I do think it's interesting the way they did the set design for the homes and how it conveys aspects of the character as well. I think hers is the only one, other than maybe the apartment that Derek ends up renting as a man cave, that looks just aesthetically really good, like something that I would want to potentially, look at or be around or be in.
It's interesting. That's a thing. That's a thing about the show that sort of feels very, very Apple-esque. If you think about when, if you watch a video, and I guess it's been videos for the last 4 years, but when you watch a video where Apple's presenting something and they want to present something in a home setting, it looks like what they've been using for the sets of Shrinking. Did that make sense?
Yeah, I follow what you were saying. I think the exception to that would be Jimmy's house, because it just looks like any other semi-modern, like, ranch style home.
Did they don't really show the outside of his house.
No, I mean, there are a couple of times that they've shown.
You haven't seen the full outside of his house.
Right. But the what I'm getting at, though, is the inside feels very much like it could be dropped in any modern suburban neighborhood.
Yeah. The reason I brought it, and that might be why they haven't shown the outside of the. Well, I never thought about going down this very narrow topic, but there's might be a reason why they don't show the outside of his house, because it's established that they're in Pasadena. And there's a lot of craftsman style houses in Pasadena. And based on the inside of his house, they do what they can to, like you said, they make it, you could sit this out anywhere. But I was like, I bet the outside would be like a craftsman style house.
Yeah, probably. And I mean, in fairness, if you think about a pool and a pool house, like you start getting into, it's probably not just any general suburban neighborhood.
No, it's fucking Pasadena.
Yeah. But they do a good job of making the rest of it feel like you could drop it in and be your neighbor's house.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like it would be similar to the house that the Dunphys live in Modern Family. But I think that was also meant to be exactly what you're describing.
Yeah, I think so.
In the in the 50s and 60s, it would have been the house with the white picket fence.
And of course, this makes sense from the concept of, a show that you want to draw in the audience as much as you can. You don't want to have it set in like a Manhattan high rise.
No, no,
That's going to throw off some of your
that's
average suburban dwelling viewers.
yeah. It's an interesting. I was thinking about it. It's like they're they're comfortably well off, but they're still probably in the bottom 50%.
Oh yeah, I would have no doubt that it's very much a solid middle or maybe upper middle class, and I would probably say more solid middle, like under two incomes. Family, they were probably upper middle class. Current state, having lost his wife, probably solidly middle class
Mm-hmm.
is what they're conveying.
Yeah, it's one of those things. It's like I can just go. I can drop. You know, I can go buy a $5,000 car for my kid. No big deal. I just write a check, and or in the case of Derek and Liz, yeah, we can buy a food truck. It's doable, and it's not. It's not really a huge. It probably took a chunk out of their savings, but they still had savings. They still had investments, and they still had you know but none of them are like, oh, I can quit my job for a year. They all still have to go do their jobs, that kind of thing. So I guess that's what it means to be solidly middle class or upper middle class.
Yeah, I think
But
that
to be
I think
fair,
that trends more upper middle class because I mean there is enough of the excuse me, there's enough of the population now that you could potentially classify as middle class that are just barely not living paycheck to paycheck. I mean, if you really want to, and I didn't expect to necessarily go down this particular
but we
comparison, but
always do.
I know. But if you really think about it, when you're poor, you're not even making it paycheck to paycheck. And there's a point where you make it paycheck to paycheck and you're breathing a little bit easier. And maybe this is also a difference in just experiences growing up and exposure to things too. But when you are able to live paycheck to paycheck, you're at a break even point. You're still poor technically, but you're no longer scrambling to try to make ends meet. You're at the point where you're making ends meet. Any unexpected expense is going to mess you up. And then you break through that barrier, hopefully, to the point where you're just kind of barely out of living paycheck to paycheck. You've got a little bit of savings. You can absorb fluctuations in expenses and income potentially, and you're comfortable enough. And I think that's what you classify as middle class based on where that percentage of the population sits and what their incomes are and everything else. And when you get to upper middle class is where, yeah, I can't afford to not work for a prolonged period of time, but I can navigate and absorb and deal with the ebbs and flows of life without necessarily scrambling or sweating things too much, as long as it's not a prolonged period of time.
So I had recently seen these numbers, and it's and I don't think this is accidental at all, but middle class means a lot of different things. It's a way of hiding. I feel like it's a way of hiding or making people feel better about things. But you know, um, I got some stats from USA Facts a few weeks ago, a couple weeks ago, and that really sort of, if you want to put in, if we put, you can put, there's one thing to be like how much you're earning versus how much net worth you have versus, and that sort of thing. And that sort of can skew things differently, because you may have somebody who is a high earner but has like a significant amount of debt and no assets to show for it. Or you might have like some assets and they have grown over time, and that's increases your overall net worth, but you might be in you may not be in an income earning bracket that matches that. And so I came across this from USA Facts that showed just by income bracket, and they broke down households in 5 different brackets. So 20% across, 20%. And then you take the top 20% and then break out the 1% because it's significant. And this is what I thought was interesting. So if you're in the top 1%, you're making more than $27 million a year, which is a lot of money. And then, but the top 20% minus the 1% would be making almost 2.9 million a year. And then you go down to the next 20%, which would be, so this would be the, I guess between 60 and 80% of income earning. And that would be, those are folks that are earning just under 800,000 a year. And then the middle class, so that middle 20%, it's 400, annual household income of $471,000 a year. And then the second 20% is a little over $250,000 a year. And then the bottom 20% would be 178. I guess those are the mean or the median income for each of those brackets.
Certainly puts it in a different perspective.
It does. So I could see those folks either being in the second 20 or the middle class.
So the funny thing is, you could actually make the argument that they're in that bottom 20%.
Oh,
well, not in California.
Sorry, that's what. Yeah. I was gonna say, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, maybe, but still.
And when I said second 20, I meant that one in between middle class and the bottom 20. I didn't mean the between middle class and the 20 in between the top 20 and the.
Yeah, no, I knew which way you meant,
but it could go either way.
But I don't think you could put them in middle class. Right? You might be able to localize and regionalize to Pasadena, maybe, but I don't necessarily think you could. You could almost put them. It would be a fight between the bottom 20% and the next section.
Right. Well, see, I think that. So obviously, Paul he's probably had his practice for quite some time.
I would put him squarely in middle class.
Right. Also because he's at an age where there was a lot of wealth accumulating opportunities for his generation.
Right.
And so, I would say he's in middle class, or maybe the bracket above middle class.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
But I would also say that Jimmy and Gabby we can make an argument that they made it into that middle class bracket because they work at his firm and he's drawing in high end clients that are able to pay that. But then you look at one of his clients that was the the woman that stole the dog.
Yeah,
I guess kidnapped or dog napped the dog, and she was living in a relatively that apartment. It looked nice, but they made it seem like it wasn't nice because of like how thin the walls were. So unclear. But then you have Jimmy has neighbors like Derek and Liz, and Derek just seems like, this is where I differentiate from him, and that he seems like a white guy that had a very high paying job. That definitely put him at the middle class at the lowest, I think.
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear with the way they emphasize the size of the family, and you don't see him really go to work.
He retired. I thought he retired.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm getting at. Like, there's no pressure for him to do something, and there's no pressure for Liz to do something. She just does things that are of interest to her.
Well, she stayed at home. That was
right. Again, no pressure for her to do something. And right. I think you can very clearly extrapolate that that they fall into that middle class category as a result.
Yeah, he probably made some savvy investment decisions because she never worked. It's not like they just moved in that house. It seemed like their kids grew up in that house, and they have their youngest son is still in college, and maybe a freshman, maybe a sophomore. I wouldn't expect he's a junior yet. He just doesn't seem, mature enough. And there's no concern that the college is paid for it. And they're also buying a food truck and a second apartment in California.
Right.
In LA, not just California, but LA. So, yeah, I think he was probably on the, he's probably he is either a very young boomer, but more than likely an older Gen X. And he was able to get in on some of that wealth building opportunity that sort of ended there. We have a number of different ways set up for you to get in touch with us to provide feedback, ask questions, or just comment in about something we've discussed.
You can hit us up on Twitter or Instagram at untitled_hosts, or shoot an email over to untitled.hosts@gmail.com.
Or get in touch directly with Jesse at jthart.com, or get in touch with me, John, via telepathy.
If you would like to support our work or are interested in listening to our new after show feed, head over to patreon.com/theUntitledPodcast and take a look at the options we have set up.
Thank you for listening.
We hope you've enjoyed the show.
And we hope to connect with more of you as we continue this journey.
That's a wrap. I'm not sure I have anything to follow that up with.
That could have been the end of the show.
That works. I mean, I thought about that when you said it too, so I think if both of us thought that, it works.
I did have a little thing for the after show.
I saw you moved it there.
Yeah. Because I didn't have a lot to say about it, but I wanted to say something about it because I've been using it as my screensaver. I've been using it as my screensaver, and I find it to be very delightful. Have you looked at this, seen it?
I have not. I'm still using whatever I had mine set to.
So, so you can set your wallpaper to be, it's just called Macintosh. And what it does is, it just shows some, it must have been done for the 40th anniversary of the Mac, because that was last year. And, it was the beginning of last year. So the Mac is at this point 41 years old, but this is the OS that came out in 2024. So it was towards the end of the year, but they just show they just represent some, I don't know what's up with, I'm sorry about that. Don't know what happened there.
Hello. I actually wonder if it was on my side. So
No.
Okay.
I was trying to invoke the screensaver and then it dropped. So I'm assuming that's what it was, but I wouldn't have expected.
Well, I had a source application not running message pop up from Audio Hijack too. So that may have just been the FaceTime call dropping. Okay. Either way, like right now I still see local recording. So that's what I'm concerned about. So I'm good.
Yeah. I don't know. Anyway, I hope. Yeah. Mine's not stopped recording. So, I was gonna say it shows a bunch of icons from, I guess, the original Mac OS, and it's kind of delightful, and it's just fun to see it moving around, and it changes colors in the background if you set it to. I think you can set it to be a single color, but it just changes colors, shows all these icons from the original Mac OS. And what really I found interesting was that wherever it shows the date or the time, it's the actual date and time. So it's not just a static video. It's like the aerial is more or less a static video, but this is it actually updates with the date and time, and I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, so when you mentioned it, I went and changed mine just to take a look. And it's already changed a couple of times in the background. I'm going to leave it on for a little bit and see. I actually don't see a lot of my background most of the time, which is why I haven't paid much attention in recent years. because I tend to run most of my windows mostly full screen, like not quite, but just enough that I see the edges of whatever the background is. And obviously, since the surgery, I haven't really been spending a whole lot of time going up and down stairs. So I've been back to my portable workflow that I'm
Yeah.
generally known for and enjoying it quite a bit. So, yeah, I'm going to leave it set and just kind of see what I see over the next few days.
So that's why I set it as a screensaver, because like you, I don't see.
I did check to use it as a screensaver as well.
It's because I don't see it as I don't see it as my background, and on my work computer, I do have it as the background on the screen that I don't see, that I use the most, but almost never see the background, and so that's why I end up seeing the screensaver, and I like it. It's lovely, and I I honestly would think, I really wish they would make this into a watch face. I think that would be a lot of fun. I don't think they will, but I think it would be a lot of fun. But there was, what was I going to, there was, oh yeah, I was going to say, I also do the portable workflow pretty much all the time. I rarely ever connect an external display to my computer. And whenever I tell that to people, they're like, how do you do stuff? And I was like, faster. And I was like, it's like, I have a really good workflow on the Mac OS. And I actually, when I switched from, a Linux computer with two, 24-inch displays to a Mac with a 15-inch display, I got more, I became more efficient, and that kind of surprised me. And so it's like, if you're going to give me a low resolution display, then I'm not going to use it. I need 4K at 21.5 inches, 5K at 27 inches, or 6K at 32 inches. And I would like that, but nobody's paying for that.